welcome to Democratic Services Committee. This is the 9th of September, September the 9th. I'm Del Morgan, Councillor and Chair of the committee. And just as usual, to make you aware that today's meeting will be recorded. I can't see any members of the public listed on my screen. Is that the case? We haven't got anyone here, so I don't need to give the advice to them. So can I please remind everyone to switch phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? And in addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphones should be switched to mute unless you're speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I'll assume that you've all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you're referring to if you can? And unless I'm introducing you, please will you introduce yourself when speaking? As you can see, the first item on the agenda today is to do a roll call. I'll now ask Alison from Democratic Services to take us through this. Diolch yn fawr, Alison. So can you do that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we'll go through members first. Councillor Harrod Aubrey.
Present.
Councillor Jeremy Hurley.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra Miller.
Present.
Councillor Sean Percy. No. Councillor Suzanne Rankers.
Present.
Councillor Alan Llewellyn.
Presennol, Alison, present.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Richards. Councillor Steve Hunt.
I'm here, Alison.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Taylor. Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present, Alison.
Thank you. And Councillor Stephanie Lynch. No. Next we move to officers. Karen Jones.
Here, Alison.
Thank you. Craig Griffiths.
Present, Alison.
Thank you. Stacey Curran.
Yes, Alison.
And Spencer Blewett.
Present.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who I haven't called this morning? No, that's the roll call complete then, Chair. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Alison. Thank you. The next item, as members can see, will be the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I see no hands. Therefore, on to item 2. So this item is the minutes from the previous meeting, starting on page 3 to page 6. So this was the meeting held 7th of June. I call the pages in case anyone has anything to raise. Page 3, page 4. On top of page 4, officers, we made an amendment to the top paragraph in terms of, for example, how would an officer approach a member of staff? I think it means a member of council, or vice versa. If members can look at that while I go on to the other pages. Page 5, and just the signature on page 6. Members happy otherwise? Okay, so just a minor amendment on the top of page 4 there, referring to the approach between officers of council and elected members. That's what that's supposed to be, I think. We'll go there. So minutes, okay. And we're now on to item 3, starting on page 7, headed the Head of Democratic Services.
Chair, with your indulgence, I'll just drop out now if that's okay, and I'll come back in after the item's complete.
Yeah, that's right. So Stacey will leave us for a short while, and I'm going to ask Karen Jones, Chief Executive Officer, to introduce this item. Diolch, Karen.
Diolch, thank you, Chair. I'm here this morning to discuss the appointment of the Statutory Head of Democratic Services. It is a post that the Council is required to hold. And formally, as members will know, that was a designation that I had in my previous role. It's not possible for the Statutory Head of Democratic Services to also be the Chief Executive. nor indeed the monitoring officer. So it is necessary for council and yourselves to consider nominating a different officer now to undertake that function. So as a Democratic Services Committee under the legislation, you've got the responsibility for making that determination. Craig and I have consulted and discussed who we think we would recommend that you put forward for that role, and we would very much recommend that you consider appointing Stacey Curran to that role. The reason for that is that Stacey's got formal qualifications, particularly around the area of scrutiny. She's got a very good understanding of how the democratic services arrangements within the council function. She has been the lead on scrutiny for quite some time now, and I think more importantly, she's got a very good relationship with members and does really understand the importance of your role. So we have every confidence in Stacey's ability to undertake that work. As you probably remember, the principal responsibilities attached to the statutory head of democratic services are to make sure the members have the resources that you need to undertake your roles effectively, to champion the scrutiny function, and obviously also to give advice then to you as the Democratic Services Committee. So, Chair, that is all I probably want to say in support of the report. I think it's pretty straightforward in that respect. And if you are minded to support the recommendation that we're making to you, it will then need to go before full council for final ratification.
Thank you, Karen. Members, you've seen the detail in that report. You've heard Karen's explanation. Personally, I'm very happy with it. But if any members would like to speak, I can see. Yes, I can see one hand. I think is it you, Steve? Councillor Stephen Hunt.
Yeah, it
Your
is
hand
me,
was
Chair.
up.
Thank you for that. I have no doubt that the report is self-explanatory, and for all the reasons Karen Jones, our Chief Exec, have given, I would 100% support this recommendation here today and for it to go to full council. Stacey Curran, as Karen has said, some of us are luckier than others who have worked with her for a very, very long time. And she has been a very professional, very helpful, and a first-class officer. And given that she has the qualifications, from what the Chief Exec has said, I am certainly happy to support this recommendation here this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. Nesa, Cynghorydd Alun Llywelyn, sgwrs hwnna.
Yeah, diolch Cadeirydd. Thanks very much, Chair. Just to speak in support of what Steve had just said, and happy to second that that Stacey is appointed to this role. I think we would all have a great deal of confidence in Stacey's professionalism and the support that she always gives to us as elected members across the board in the council. And I'm sure we all wish her well with the new designation.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Alun. One more hand. Councillor Sandra Miller. Sandra?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I too believe that Stacey is probably the right person for this role. I've known her since she's come into to a post, which is quite a long time. She was a child when she came in, but are we absolutely confident that there's no one else that would be able to challenge this appointment? I do believe that Stacey is the right person. However, if there's anybody out there that could challenge, because it hasn't gone the personnel route, could somebody challenge that along the way? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. This report does mention about the procedure, but I'll let the officers answer that directly. Thank you. Officers?
Yeah, it's not a vacancy, Councillor Miller, in the traditional sense of the word. So it's a statutory role that we're designating somebody to carry out. And that's the same process as you followed when you appointed me, and the same process as when you appointed Phil Graham before me. So we've looked at the officers that we've got within legal services and within democratic services, which is where we would be looking to place the designation. And both Craig and I are satisfied that Stacey is the right person for the role, and there isn't an opportunity for anyone else to challenge that under employment arrangements. I don't know if Craig wants to add to that.
Not very much so, Chief Executive. I would also as well, we did run it by our trade union colleagues as well, obviously, before we had this proposal brought before to members, and they were supportive of the principles that we were looking at as well, because likewise, they didn't see it as being any change in any working practices. It was just adding a statutory role element to the current post, which is being occupied by Stacey.
Is that okay, Sandra? Okay. Members?
Yes, Chair, that's fine by me. I just wanted to make sure that that was the case, because it would be horrendous if Stacey was to, take up the post and then somebody challenge, from another area. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, good. Thanks, Sandra. That's a good point cleared up. So it's not a vacancy as such; it's a role, it's a designation, isn't it? So I think we are clear, and we're okay to proceed that way. So members, nobody else is indicating. So you're all happy that we go with the recommendation to take this to full council? Yeah, no hands up against. So I'll take that as read. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Can we bring Stacey back in? Where is she?
Yes, no problem, Chair. I'll call her back in now.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Stacey. Can you hear me? Right, welcome back. Okay, fine. That's clear. So unanimously, members are going to support the recommendation to put to full council, which is in a few weeks' time, isn't it? To make that role formal. So right, keep smiling. we going on to item 4. Stacey, you okay?
Congratulations, Stacey.
Thank you all. Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chair, with your agreement, can I leave the meeting now?
I'm not sure about that, Karen. All right, just this once.
Thank you very much.
Don't go out in the rain. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr, Karen. Right. Okay. Thank you. Well done, Stacey. So we're going on to item 4, which starts on page 11. This is the report back from our review on the Constitution and the outcomes of the Task and Finish group. So page 11, and I think Craig will introduce this now. Craig?
Indeed, thank you very much, Chair. So as the Chair just mentioned, earlier on this year, we had our Task and Finish group ultimately to look at our constitution requirements, and I'm very grateful for all the input that members gave as part of that process. I found it a very interesting experience because it was the first time we've really sat down with members and done a systematic review of our constitution. So not only to make sure that it reflects the legal requirements which we were obliged ultimately to have, but also as well the practical elements that members ultimately would wish to see from it. So following on from the individual sessions that we had, I produced with the assistance of Alison, who also attended at the meetings, a table setting out all the various comments that were raised and obviously the proposals then we would look at to try and implement and change some of those elements. And so at Appendix 1 of your report, ultimately that summarises the entirety of the process that we considered there. I've also as well, when I've reviewed the Constitution, had to make some legislative amendments more than anything, just to update some references here and there in the various different elements. And you'll see then on pages 13, 14 and 15, 16, 17 and 18 of your reports that ultimately they are the amendments ultimately we just need to make sure it's fully legally compliant with all the new legislation ultimately that's come about in recent times. So it's brought back now to the Democratic Services Committee today, hopefully just to consider or discuss any further outstanding points. Ultimately then, if you are happy to support it, it will be commended to full council at the end of this month, because when it comes to constitutional amendments, the actual decision as to whether to make them rests with full council. But I would just be asking Democratic Services Committee just to endorse those proposals today and the work of your Task and Finish group. And hopefully then in full council, we'll be able to get them approved then and implemented thereafter. Happy to take any questions, Chair, the members may have.
Diolch yn fawr, Craig. Thank you. Members, any comments, questions?
Chair, I got my hand up. I don't know if you can see it.
Hang on a sec. Yeah, yes, I've got a hand coming through now. Sorry, it must be the weather. The Wi-Fi is a bit slow here. So, Steve Hunt, please, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Craig, thank you for the piece of work and working with this committee. And I got no issues with the recommendations and so forth. But implementation of them, like on page 18, it mentions that members need to declare an interest when liaisoning with officers there. Now, what I'm saying, when we go through a piece of work, and you know how busy schedules all councillors have, like officers, of course, sometimes it can be lost. You know, new members may be coming in next May, and I know you'll give a refresher and you'll explain, but I just don't want any member, myself included, if I'm still here or even now, when we liaise with officers, where sometimes to declare interest, we may be a little bit naive or not understand what we may need to declare, and we could potentially get ourselves into difficulty. I know you're pretty good because you give advice always, but that's not what I'm referring to, because we may have meetings with other officers, and you know, I've had, well, we all do, isn't it? Have lots of meetings with different officers, and I just not for us to get into trouble, especially with everything that's gone on with the new what they call it, code of conduct and so forth as well. So I just wondered, to implement it, it's all good. The report is right, it's fine, I'm 100% supporting. But is there anything you can add to give advice as so that we don't get ourselves into difficulty, really? Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Indeed, so thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hunt, for that question. So a couple of different points mentioned there. First of all, following the Constitution then ultimately be amended by full council, it was my intention to write out to all members, and I'll provide you with a copy of the updated Constitution and some of the changes ultimately that have been there. And just to obviously remind you of some of those additional key obligations ultimately that were in there. The principles itself haven't really changed ultimately from what it would have been anyway. All I've been really looking to do is just consolidate them a little bit more, because in theory, when you are having your discussions with officers and you have a potential personal or prejudicial interest in some way, you would usually be telling the officers, look, I'm coming to speak to you, but please be aware I do have a potential interest in this matter. So what the actual change is doing is just about trying to write that down, so it's basically built into the rules then as part of that process. But I'll be doing some training for members where I'll get all of that information out just to remind you of the key obligations as well, and I'll also be making officers clear as well that they need to be aware of that at the same time when they're having discussions with members. Hopefully as well, over the course of the next couple of weeks and months, you'll be having a member seminar with regards to officer and member relationships. As part of that training, that will also be mentioned there about some of the issues that you need to be aware of when you are having discussions with officers. Similarly then, we're going to be building the same then into our member induction programme for next year. The Task and Finish group, obviously, that's been looking on that has been considering the member induction programme, and in a few weeks' time, we'll be presenting a revised version back to the group for them to consider, which incorporates all of these issues. So from the moment that members are first elected in May 2022, we'll be imprinting code of conduct matters and all those various principles from the word go. So hopefully any new members coming on board will be fully au fait with all of these new requirements, and any then members returning, they will also be aware now of the customs that will ultimately go with it. So there will be a full package put around members to support them in this regard. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah, just briefly. Thank you for that, Craig. It's very clear and understandable. It's just I was thinking of new members, and you've covered that as well. You know, there's a lot of changes possibly, and I just wondered, you know, most members would be parochial, wouldn't they? That's what our jobs are. We are sort of more interlinked with our communities and the people, and there's undoubtedly going to be in declaration of interest. And up until now, I doubt very much if many members have ever spoken to officers and mentioned any real declarations of interest. So that's all. I've seen it in the report that when we pass it, it's something that we have to do. So I just wondered, you know, how are you going to sort of get us to remember that we need to say, look, just to clear it up in case it may not be a prejudicial interest or any other interest, but it just needs to be perhaps mentioned for officers to be trained as well, so they'd understand what an interest may or may not be. And that was where I was getting to. But thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Steve. Yeah, I think members, you know, the items like declarations of interest or potential declaration of interest and code of conduct issues are things which A, need to be formally delivered to members and officers in training, but B, perhaps also need to be continuously drip fed, you know, as time goes on to remind people. And I'm sure we'll do that. Now then, since we've started the meeting, we welcome Anthony Richards and Sean Percy. I think they're still with us. Fingers crossed on the Wi-Fi front. I'm looking at any other hands. I don't have any yet. So if members are happy with that, can we please look at the recommendations at the top of page 20? So A, B, and C there, and obviously to commend the report to council. Members happy to take that forward?
Move, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. So that we're all happy. I'm looking for any hands now for any dissent or any questions. If not, no, we'll go with that. So diolch yn fawr, that's passed. Thank you, everyone. Right, item 5, starting on page 33, is the members' ICT reference group. Craig, you're going to start this one?
I'll hand over to Stacey if that's okay, Chair. Stacey and Spencer will be able to answer any questions then specifically.
Right, I haven't got Stacey on my screen, but yes, I can see you still. Yeah, there you are. Okay, Stacey, if you can introduce this one, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just very briefly, members will be aware that we established a members IT reference group quite some time ago now, with the aim of using the group to trial members ICT needs, requirements, any trials we needed to flush through the members before we took it out to the wider group of members. And it's very much we re-establish the group as and when there's a business need for it. So as and when there are new developments in ICT for members to trial from your perspective, before we tranche out then to the wider membership. And you remember Office 365 was an example, and caseworker.gov have been some examples you may have looked at previously. All this report is really asking for is the re-establishment of the group again, because we are now in a very, we've got a lot of things on our plate ICT wise in terms of the upcoming move to Zoom in relation to the translation issues that we are looking to trial and change the platform of our meetings from Teams to Zoom for meetings, which will obviously require a lot of practice, and we'd really like members to help us with that before we try and do the swap over on the wider scale. We're also moving to look at the member induction for 2022 and all of the stuff involving members ICT and the kit and the ICT policy, for example. And what we'll talk about slightly later in the meeting is the hybrid equipment, which may or may not come into the council meeting rooms, which will enable us to do our legal requirements in relation to webcasting and hybrid meetings. And that's again going to be a whole new way of working for members. So we'd really appreciate the input of the IT reference group in all of these things to really give us a flavour of your experience and help shape how we're going to roll that out to wider members. So that's not an exhaustive list, but that's a few things that we can think of quite quickly that are coming up that we really need members' input on. So all we're really asking today is for the re-establishment of the IT reference group and a focus on the membership if possible, because the membership on there is quite, it's from a while ago when we established the group initially, and we're really grateful for as much input as we can from members on a varying scale of interest, ability, because it's really helpful for us to get a wide range of view from members on using all of this stuff. So just a plea really for a refreshed membership if anybody is interested in being on the group. It's not a decision-making group by any means, it's really a trial as the terms of reference state. So a chat really about the group and how it's going to work, and the recommendations are to re-establish the group and to refresh the membership, and the leaders of the political parties as well will be asked if they want to put any representations on that group as well, just to widen the membership as full as possible to allow us to really get the input of members for all of these things going forward. So happy to take any questions, Chair, but that's basically what it is this morning.
Diolch, Stacey. I got a couple of hands up. Firstly, may I just say the C in the ICT, it refers to information communications technology, has become just as important now as the technology itself, and of course the use of it. So as we are dealing with platforms which are evolving as you know, as the world goes on, I think we'll need to pay attention to all of that, especially as we come and discuss the next item on the agenda. So yeah, we'll come to members putting their names forward and all the rest of it shortly. In case there are any questions, by the way, I'm quite happy as chair to continue being part of the ICT group. The recommendations for this are coming on the bottom of page 34. Questions and points first, though, and I have Cynghorydd Alun Llywelyn, please.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thanks, Chair. And I certainly support the recommendation. I think that you know, the group has done valuable work before. I'm not going to put my own name forward, just in terms of sort of time commitment and everything. I mean, I realise I would struggle to sort of attend the meetings, but obviously take an interest. As a bit of a Luddite myself, you know, I'm probably the lowest common denominator. If you get something to work that I can understand, then it'll do for everybody. You know, that's the litmus test for me. But I have actually emailed Stacey this morning. I don't know if my email made any sense to you, Stacey. I don't expect an answer no necessarily, but I got a bit confused about how many members we were supposed to put forward, and I've had some expressions of interest from within my group, and I've forwarded the names on to Stacey.
Okay.
I can come back, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Llywelyn. I saw that this morning. I saw your nomination, so that's great. Thank you. And I'll just take up with Craig the political balance outside. But thank you for the nominations, and I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine. So that's no problem at all. Thank you.
There we are. Great. Thanks.
Diolch, Alun. Next, Councillor Steve Hunt. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Alan sort of covered the point I was going to ask. I mean, it is a very important group, and as we move into different technologies and Zoom, I'm sure many of us have used Zoom anyway, I would assume. I certainly have used the platform, and it offers us a lot more than Teams, that's for sure. However, you mentioned the importance of getting members on there, and I just wondered, Stacey, whether, I know Alan cleared that up by saying he's put a few names forward. Obviously the balance and the amount you need on there, because they can share back with other members who don't go on there within their own meetings and so forth, so which will be good as well. But I just wondered, you know, the work that we do, as I've been on it from the beginning, you really don't want too many. So I know you said you're going to speak to Craig and others. I just want to highlight that for it to be a very interactive and important part of council work, to have 20 or more, it isn't practical. Because of when Mr. Blewett comes in, and he knows when they offer advice, it's sometimes one-on-one. How they need to help and support and show what's going forward with the technology. So I just want to highlight your role, Stacey, which is just as important as any member, on how this group is formed then to go forward for the right reasons and for what we are aiming to achieve. That's all, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll certainly let Stacey and Craig have a quick conversation afterwards and contact the group leaders about the numbers anticipated. May I just say, I think I'm right in putting it this way. The group will not only have meetings, there'll be a few meetings, but the group will also be used to pilot or guinea pig things and feedback thoughts. So, you know, it'll be that kind of activity as well as actual meetings. So that'll be useful to have additional members, maybe one or two or whatever you Craig and Stacey decide from the groups. Okay. So on that, then I'll check. Yes, I've got one more hand at the minute. It's two more hands. Sandra first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wouldn't mind putting my name forward because I'm probably one of the most dense person when it comes to IT, and I think if you can get me on board, then you could get anybody on board. So, you know, if you know, if that's acceptable, then obviously I'd put my neck on the block and join the group. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good news, Sandra. I was assuming that you'd be there, so thank you for that. Right, Sean, I think, is the next one. I'm losing names now on the right-hand side. I think, yeah, Sean Percy, please come in.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly just reaffirm my commitment to the group. That's all. I'm more than happy to continue and do this piece of work. So thanks.
Good news. Thanks, Sean. There we are. Now then, I don't see any other hands. So would any other member who has been or even who has not been previously on the ICT group like to just say here and now that you're happy to join us? Otherwise, we'll do the list on emails, and we certainly do the group's members on email. But we're looking on our recommendation, page 34.
Just quickly.
Yeah, Steve.
Sorry,
all right.
Perhaps I didn't make it clear that I sort of still wanted to remain. I think it's important for me and for me to feedback. I probably didn't say that. It might have sounded as if I was leaving, but no, I also will like to remain. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Steve. Right. We need two things. That the recommendation includes adopting the terms of reference of the group. So I'm taking it as the latest variation of those that we had been working to, and the membership be confirmed and the date arranged for the first meeting. Well, that's something that can happen after the present meeting now. But can we confirm that the members who are already indicating, plus any committee members who contact officers after this meeting within a reasonable timescale, plus the names put forward from the three groups, that we take that as being the constitution of the group? Is that okay, Craig?
Indeed, Chair.
There we are. Members, are you happy to move in that direction?
Move, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. Right, okay, so no hands now for against. So we'll take that as right. That's adopted. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. All right, item 6. Item 6 is the hybrid meeting arrangements and equipment, and this is now on a separate document. You can bear with me, members. I'm going to ask Stacey to perhaps introduce the whole item first of all, and I'm sure that Spencer will join us in a minute. So this is on a supplementary document which has come out more recently. There we are, urgent item. So members, bear with us. If Stacey would like to start, we've got a 14-page document. If you can all find it.
I think Craig will introduce it, Chair, but just checking, have all members, can you all find it? I know it's a bit tricky when it's been sent as an urgent, and apologies for that. We were waiting for some last minute financial information, which is why it came as an urgent item. Is everyone okay with, has everyone got it? Yeah, great. So
any members who haven't got access, if you can let us know on the chat or something, and we'll try and sort that out. But if you've all got access, it starts agenda item 6. It's got 14 pages, starting on page 3. So I think, Craig, you set the scene then, and we'll carry on from there.
There we go. Thank you very much, Chair. So just as Stacey mentioned, apologies to the members in the first instance. We were waiting for some information so we could bring it to today's committee, and that was the reason it had to come out slightly later than some of your other papers associated with it. So once again, apologies for that. It probably helps if I said a little bit of the background in respect of this matter, because obviously hybrid meetings are something that we are sort of working to at the moment as we've gone remote as a result of the pandemic, but there's a lot more issues probably now that need to be considered as part of this. So members will recall back in 2019, in the early part of 2020, we started undertaking some work to look at webcasting of our council meetings, and there was a task and finish group that was established in order to be able to consider a lot of these issues. And at the time, we were going to bring reports back to members, obviously, to start looking at webcasting and some of the other arrangements associated with that. But March 2020 came, the pandemic came with us, and all of a sudden then we had to go to our virtual meetings, which is the process that we've been utilising now at the moment. So as a result of that, we are now ticking some boxes. Shall we say our information is being relayed on our website. We have a YouTube channel where meetings are now being uploaded as well as part of it. But in amongst all of this now, the legislation itself has actually changed compared to what we were operating previously, as well as having the requirements now for publication and webcasting and the various elements surrounding that. We're also now under a legal obligation where we have to put arrangements in place to effectively allow for what we have effectively deemed hybrid meetings. So what that essentially means is that members will be able to choose how they participate ultimately in council meetings. So that would be in person, for example, attending the council chamber, or attending remotely and taking part in the full meeting then that way. So the law now is stipulating ultimately that that is the case, which we have to now implement. And also as well, if you recall that over the last couple of months, we had our members survey where the consensus ultimately that came from members was that they would find the benefits of hybrid meetings ultimately as being beneficial for them. They would like to try and get back in the chamber because obviously the benefits that face-to-face contact and the types of meetings that we have can have, but it could be beneficial as well to have that facility where they could sign in remotely to help balance work-life commitments and other working arrangements then and family issues surrounding that. So following on from that, officers have now been undertaking a lot of work ultimately to try and address this new legislative requirement and what members have put forward. And because of that, we've approached a company who's well established ultimately in installing the various equipment that would be needed to accommodate a hybrid meeting. Simply being, it's not as simple as a few cameras or a few microphones ultimately be inserted. It will require quite a significant technological investment in our rooms to enable this to be achieved, because it will build in the issues such as webcasting, Welsh language translation, voting elements, so we can make sure that decision making is valid and appropriate going forward. So there's a lot of work ultimately that would be needed in order to achieve this, and that's pretty much set out then at paragraph 20 of your report, which gives an overview of the financial circumstances and what would be needed to fully achieve this. Similarly then, at the same time as well, we would need to make sure that there are some works undertaken to our chamber to be able to accommodate a lot of these meetings and also to make it more accessible to members of the public as well. So there will be some DDA elements in particular that we are trying to do to the building just to try and make it more accommodating for those members of the public. When hopefully the building reopens, they will also be able to attend meetings then as well. So members will note specifically though from the report that we're concentrating at this stage solely on the chamber for it. That's predominantly due ultimately to the expense of the actual installation elements for it. If we wanted to look and kit out other rooms potentially, to accommodate this, there would be additional costs. So we're also suggesting in the report we have a little bit of a study group to basically look at whether we can establish some other rooms within council building. So for example, the committee rooms in Neath or the committee rooms in Talbot, to also to be able to accommodate these hybrid types of meetings as well at the same time. So there will be a little bit of work that needs to be undertaken as to what is suitable. But in order for us to meet the legal requirements that we have to by May 2022, the proposal at this stage is to obviously look at just ensuring the chamber is prepared for that. As part of this process as well, we're going to be looking at various different avenues as to how we can support members and at different elements, as Stacey mentioned, through the members IT panel earlier on. So I think it's important to note this is not about hybrid meetings going forward and what our policy and protocols are ultimately going to be. This is ultimately about the purchase of the equipment that will enable us then to put those arrangements ultimately in place. And because this is a key democratic services function, I thought it was very important that the Democratic Services Committee have an opportunity to consider this. But because of the financial expenditure that will be allowed, there will be a report that will go to Cabinet at the end of this month. But the report effectively is here today for members of Democratic Services to discuss it, hopefully endorse it, and then it will go to Cabinet then at the end of this month for final approval. We'll then look at putting the orders in place to be able to achieve this, and we're hoping that by the end of this calendar year, or certainly going into next year, the equipment will be in place so we can start trialling it with members, perhaps via the members IT group as well, with the aim that we be able to have hybrid meetings as soon as possible next year. or alternatively at its very latest following local government elections in May 2022, everything will be in a position then to be fully up and running for hybrid meetings at that point. So happy to answer any questions on the report that members may have, Chair, and hopefully I can clarify any outstanding issues of concern.
Diolch, Craig. I think thank you for bringing this to Democratic Services. We're being pressed by central government here in Wales to follow the route of hybrid meetings, and I think it's probably quite correct that that's the future. So these questions, both technologically, and in terms of the use and the wider aspects, I think they need to be debated, and Democratic Services Committee is a good place to start, I suppose. So, the members, questions and comments. I'm sure there are many. Kentucky, Darlene Llewellyn, please.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thanks, Craig, for the report, and I welcome the recommendations. It's interesting reading the report. It begins with the very tentative steps that were being planned early 2020, so only about a year and a half ago, for initial webcasting, and perhaps a rather reluctant approach at that time, though some of us were pushing for it. Now, in the intervening 18 months, obviously, the whole environment has been transformed, both for the way in which conduct meetings and the way our whole employed staff undertake their work as well. So I support the report and the recommendation. I'd note on I think it's paragraph 14, as Craig just said, the emphasis initially is on the chamber, and I fully accept the practicality of that. I know that we'll have to take some decisions perhaps a bit further along the line about when we're actually going to return to the chamber, and particularly if we're envisaging that full council will be with personal attendance specifically. Obviously, we need to be confident that there is sufficient room, given whatever the COVID situation is at the time, that we're moving towards that. But I am pleased that there will also be further consideration of looking at other rooms as well. I mean, partly because I think the extent of hybrid working in all sorts of, for members and staff is going to continue extending. And as I've mentioned before in this committee and elsewhere, I don't think the chamber is a particularly good place for scrutiny meetings. It's good for full council meetings, but sort of formal settings, but not really for the sort of around the table work that we undertake for scrutiny. So I agree with the starting with the chamber, but I do think we need to look at adapting further accommodation for that. Paragraph 17, welcome the capacity in this proposed new system for Welsh language translation. We've known the practical difficulties of achieving that in the 18 months, but it's good to see that being built in to the proposed system. And then towards the end of the report, it's noted that we have to consider alternatives, and that would be predominantly sort of continuing with the sort of setup that we have at the moment. But I think that which obviously would be cheaper, but I think that we should move forward, otherwise we will keep on returning to this issue in a piecemeal fashion, because of both practicalities and legislation, and the fact that the members have expressed a wish to continue to develop hybrid working. So I think it's, we need to grasp this particular nettle and move forward with by accepting the recommendations. Thanks.
Diolch, Alun. Okay, I'm sure officers will come back on points generally towards the end. So unless there's anything specific from officers on that, can I move on to Councillor Steve Hunt next, please?
Chair, if I could just...
Colin, Craig, if you got anything
just to pick up a couple of points from Councillor Llewellyn whilst they're open. I think I very much agree with you. I would like to see other rooms potentially being utilised for it. I very much take your point, obviously, about scrutiny is much more conducive in a sort of round table element, smaller rooms, so you can actually get into the detail of what's being considered. So that is definitely one of our key aims going forward. One of the scenarios that we've been looking at is what they call portable equipment, which effectively can travel around various rooms as well. It's not as conducive, obviously, the fixed assets that you would have in a council chamber, and that's part of the feasibility study that we went to look at. Do we look at perhaps kitting out just one room in one of the buildings? Do we look at portable equipment which we can travel around to various different venues? So there's various different scenarios we can look at, and hopefully the work of that group then ultimately will be quite significant in that sense to try and consider it. Very much agree with you on the concept of Welsh language. I think it's very important that we do get that back. It's something, funny enough, we have been trialing quite recently with Zoom in particular, looking at our interpreter and translator when they come in, and we finally think we've got a system now that works in that regard, and it's very user friendly. So fingers crossed the members IT panel as well will be able to assist us now in testing that as we go forward. And again, the alternative options, I share your views. It is practical and it can work essentially. For those of you who have been in the chamber when we've had recent meetings, you can see sometimes how difficult it can be in respect of feedback. The quality of the meetings isn't great in that sense. And as we look at embarking on our participation work next year, which is all about involving more people in the democratic services processes, hopefully this level of engagement, this level of equipment and opportunities that people will have to join meetings will go further in trying to promote attendance and involvement then in our democratic processes. So thank you, Chair.
Sure, Craig. Okay, next speaker is Councillor Steve Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Llewellyn sort of asked most of the points I was going to raise, and Craig has given answers to the questions I was going to have about the difficulties of hybrid in the sense of when some are at home, the feedback and so forth. But I'm sure going forward, the technology and what we learn will make it an awful lot better for it to work, because I have no doubt that this is going to be the way forward for the reasons Craig has given and the report sets out. For instance, I mean, if we look at the attendance prior to COVID, when we didn't do Teams meeting, correct me if I'm not right, Stacey, but the attendance levels have dramatically increased throughout this period, and that is with not in a hybrid, only on the trial. Then we did do a few meetings, and I don't think they worked that badly, really. A few technical difficulties, but they went ahead and they fulfilled their purpose. So I'm certainly all for this, that we accommodate all members in the way that they would like to take part in important meetings, because that's what they're elected for, and sometimes work and so forth may stop them having the ability for particular meetings at the time. So I'm all for this recommendation and the report. And the last question I would just wanted to ask, well, Alan was right about the chamber. However, I mean, I'm sure you're looking to find another committee room to fulfill. But you know how committees, Stacey, currently the sort of diary of them, there's not too many that clashes there. There's not many that run at the same time. So I was wondering, as we move forward, if the chamber could be used. I'd like to get back there myself in my committee, you know, to trial once it's kitted out, of course, this hybrid programme going forward. Could all committees be offered the opportunity until another room is sort of made available? Because I think it's an option that it would have good feedback then from how things work going forward. So, like I said, Arlene covered most of my other points and Craig have answered them. So it's those just a couple of things from me, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Craig, do you want to say about the rooms that you mentioned them before?
Absolutely, indeed, Chair. So yes, we are looking at other committee rooms in that sense as part of the process, but the aim effectively is going to be, as we move forward, once the chamber is ultimately kitted out, that will be the dedicated place for council meetings, cabinet meetings, scrutiny meetings, regulatory committee meetings in that sense, because it will have that feature ultimately built in. And until we can get the other venues kitted out ready to go, that will be the de facto room in the first instance, as we can try and get everything up and running at that point, Chair.
There we are, yes, and I suppose one step at a time. We do have to keep in mind the public have probably got the right to attend in person or in the hybrid sense online. So wherever we meet physically, we've got to at least consider the members of the public who might want to come and be in that room. So anyway, I'm sure we'll get there eventually, but the initial recommendations look fine to me. Now then, we have two more hands. The next hand is Councillor Sean Percy. Sean, how are you?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is, I suppose, a little bit interesting. It's taken a slight curveball from our original kind of thoughts on webcasting, isn't it? But yeah, we've got to press ahead with this, and that this will definitely fulfil that sort of legislative requirement in terms of providing the webcasting in the chamber. I've got to echo some of the comments by colleagues about scrutiny and sort of other meeting rooms. You know, scrutiny meetings are not pleasant in the chamber. There's a couple of issues. You can make it a bit better by making sure people sit very close together, but of course the chamber isn't accessible on all levels to members either. So if you sit in that lower circle, it feels like a much better meeting, but not everybody can get down there either. So I would certainly sort of endorse looking at some other rooms, and I would reflect perhaps on the experience we've had with the portable microphones, which I don't think have been particularly great. I think we've had very mixed success with those portable microphones in the committee rooms, not having enough of them not working very well, and people not really using them properly either. And also the room layout, you know, you come in and the room's in different shapes every time you go in there, and I think a dedicated space for these scrutiny meetings may be worth considering that's properly set up, because I think people will use it correctly as well. So that just a couple of thoughts on that. The other question I've got is, obviously not too long ago we updated the microphone technology in the chamber, which I know is essential because it had reached the end of its life. It was the original equipment, I think, wasn't it? I'm just wondering whether there's any scope of reusing that somewhere else for some useful purpose, because it would seem a bit of a waste to sort of see that go in the bin. But I'm not quite sure whether we've got any use for it. But it just occurred to me we have spent, you know, a bit of money, you know, doing that in recent years. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Sean. Any thoughts on passing on old equipment, Greg?
Absolutely, Chair. So it's something we can certainly look at as we go forward. It's a shame in some ways that we can't fully integrate, obviously, the ones that we have existing at present, because as well as the new microphone setup, the system itself is very different ultimately as to what it accommodates. So the base that members will see ultimately when it's before them won't just be a microphone anymore. It will be very much interactive. So you would have, for example, report headings ultimately being considered. It would be your voting tool where you would vote for or against, or whether you're abstaining something. There's the facility where we can push down notifications ultimately to you. So when you have, for example, an amendment that's being made to a particular motion, rather than you perhaps have to remember what ultimately it's been said, the Democratic Services Officer will be able to send it down, so it will always be in front of you at that point for it. So that's the reason ultimately we can't utilise the new model, but we will certainly explore what other avenues could be out there, whether there are any points of sale where we can look at in different regard, whether we can utilise them in different way, and I'll gladly report back to members if we are able to find anything in that regard for you.
Thanks, Greg. Councillor Sandra Miller. Sandra?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Page 10, paragraph 21, where it says that undertaking this work involved using the European Journal. Why are we still using European Journal then, when we've been out of Europe for a bit of time? Because it is bulky and it is a long process to go through. So why are we still using that? And the other, before you come in, Craig, and the other one, well, the other two, in all of our thinking, we should be thinking disabled first, not last. No, we made a commitment that that would be the case. And obviously, the other one, and you would expect me to come in on this, in that a lot of what we're doing here to make this open, you know, to everyone, for want of a better word, it's still undermining the employer's duty to allow time off for councillor duties. The law states it, and by doing this, people can log on wherever, doing whatever, that does undermine the duty of the employer to give time off.
Oh, you've just gone on mute, Councillor Miller.
Yeah. You're showing on mute.
Legal duty, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Craig will answer now. I thought, by the way, on the European tendering, my reading was that was a historical reference to the fact that originally Private Eye had been selected through some sort of robust, tendering situation. Not that we as Neath Talbot were doing. So, Craig, can you confirm that?
Absolutely, Chair. That's absolutely correct. Yes, indeed. So we are still under actually a legal obligation at this stage, ultimately, to any contracts over a certain value to advertise in them in the official journal of the European Union. We're not having to do it in this particular circumstance because we are relying on a framework agreement that's been set up that means we can go straight to one organisation without having to go through that competition approach. So it's an organisation like Public Eye, very well renowned throughout the UK. They are the chosen supplier under this framework for this particular arrangement, so that's why we would be utilising them. But just to pick up on Councillor Miller's point and to give you that overview, at this moment in time, we are still bound by the European rules in respect of procurement. There are some consultations that are going to be going through UK government at the moment, and Welsh Government have said they're looking at an all-UK approach in respect of procurement. So there is consistency for organisations. So we're going to be looking at that, and we may see the provisions ultimately change in the next 12 to 18 months, we would hope. But for now, we're still caught by those general principles where we do have to advertise still in Europe. I think it was one of the issues that came out of the Brexit deal for a sort of further period almost. Picking up the point on the disability access, absolutely, I think that's one of our fundamental concerns going forward. So one of the elements we're also going to be looking at is looking at the public gallery elements. It's not the most conducive if people do want to have access and be able to attend. So it's looking at making one floor in that sense, and just about promoting greater access for people. So there is no obstacle ultimately from anyone saying that they can't attend or they couldn't participate. It's an open game then for anyone, no matter what issues or disability they may have. Thirdly, then, with regards to your point on the employers element, absolutely, I think that is a key issue we need to factor in, obviously, as part of our member induction programme next year. One of the things we're going to be looking at is how I will give some advice to potential members of what the rights they have and how they can liaise with their employers. And hopefully, if there are no issues then for everyone, but if there are, I can work with those individual members to try and get that message across and try and resolve any issues that they have. It's happened historically over the years, and we're well established. We can try and help out in different ways in that regard. So hope that assists, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. There are no other hands up. I can't see any other hands up. So before we move to the recommendations now, Spencer, you were there waiting patiently. Is there anything you'd like to add from your perspective, what you've been looking at?
No, I think both Craig and Stacey have done an excellent job in conveying the possibilities and the need to move in this direction. And the piecemeal approach of doing the council chamber, getting that fit for purpose, and then looking to extend that into other chambers is the right way of going about it.
Okay. Here we are. Maybe incremental is probably a good word for it, yeah, that we are moving forward one step at a time and learning from what we do. Thank you. I know you've been doing a lot in the background there, Spencer. Remembering back to the days when officers, Stacey and I in particular, looked at meetings happening online in other places. There's been a lot of learning everywhere since then, across the world actually. So I'm sure we can pick up on many of the things learnt and just advance from there. So in camera draw, as we say, one step at a time. All right, I'm looking, no other hands are going up in the meantime. So we're going to move to recommendations on page 13. So here we are, recommended that we as a committee, having regard to the integrated impact screening assessment, endorse the following ABC. So the upgrade to council chamber, as explained in paragraph 18, entering into a contract with Public Eye, as explained in paragraph 20. And then thirdly, the establishment of a feasibility study to consider the alternative venues that we've been talking about. So, you know, that's the further step forward into the future. Members, are you happy that those three can be, so that the recommendation then can be taken forward and then commended to Cabinet?
Move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. All members happy? That's good, thank you. Diolch yn fawr. So that was item 6. Right, item 7 now is the forward work programme. We have to go back to the original document now. Members, go back to the agenda proper. And we are looking at page 39 for the forward work programme. Here we go. And that table that we have is obviously, members are aware we try and plan the forward work programme, but this is quite flexible as things come in or drop out, actually. Any comments on the forward programme? Are you all happy?
Chair, if I can just mention, members can see there's a meeting programme for October and then April. That's obviously a bit of a gap, with the view that there'll be a lot going on in between that time in relation to the elections next May. It may be that Craig and I may need to call some extra meetings depending on what's happening at the time with anything we need Democratic Services approval or insight on. So just they are the statutory meetings that you've got in, but it may be that we may need to call extras depending on the business that's happening, but we don't know what it is yet. So just to members aware, we might have an extra one in between those meetings, which we don't really know yet. So just to make you aware.
Thanks, Stacey. That's true. And of course, there are a couple of task and finish groups that have been set up and you know, things coming back. So there may well be something in between October and April. Or I think the IRPW annual timetable seems to fit in around that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, then yes, we'll take that forward work programme as read. Then, if nobody's got any comments on that. So if you're all happy. Right, diolch yn fawr. Item 8, any urgent items? No, nothing urgent today, apart from the Wi-Fi and the weather. So that brings us to a neat conclusion, I think. Diolch yn fawr pawb. Can I thank everyone, members, colleagues and officers, all of you. So thanks for everything you do, and please keep on doing it and keep smiling. I'll close the meeting.
Thanks all.
Talbot, Chair.